Students, in this session, we will learn what is a class, what is a relative pronoun, and what is a relative class. Students, can you read this? Yes, you are right. Rose. Rose is a word. Do you know the meaning of this word? Rose is one type of flower. We all know words are formed from letters. This word also formed from four letters. What are the four letters? R, O, S, C. These four letters are combined or joined as a unit to convey some meaning. So, rose is a word. It is conveying a meaning. Students, you can read this also. What is this? Cricket. This is also a word. Do you know the meaning of this word? This is one type of game. This word is also formed from letters. How many letters have been used to form this word? Seven letters. What are that seven letters? C, R, I, C, K, E, T. Yes, very good. So these seven letters are joined as a unit to convey some meaning. So, students, words are formed from letters to convey some meaning. Now, read this. Beautiful rose flower. Here, group of words are joined together. Are these words are giving complete sense? No, they are not giving complete sense. They are joined together as a unit, but this unit is not giving complete sense. So we call this phrase. We call this phrase. Beautiful rose flower is a phrase. It is not giving complete sense, but it is giving only partial sense or partial meaning. In this group of words, the subject and verb are not there. So we call this a phrase. So phrase is formed by joining words together. So what are the words in this phrase? Beautiful, rose, flower. So these three words joined together and formed as phrase. So students, words are formed from letters and phrases are formed from words. So is it clear, students? Words are formed from letters and phrases are formed from words. The words come together and form into a phrase. The phrase may give some sense, but it will not give complete sense, and it does not have a subject and verb also. Now read this. Yes, you are right. I like beautiful rose flower. Is this a phrase? No, this is not a phrase because this is giving complete meaning. I like beautiful rose flower is giving complete meaning. So, what do we call this? We call this a sentence. What is a sentence? A sentence is a group of words arranged together grammatically to give full sense or meaning. So, in this sentence, the words I like beautiful rose flower are arranged together grammatically. So, this sentence is giving complete meaning. Students, up to now, we have learned how the words are formed and how the phrases and sentences are formed. Yes, I think you might have understood very clearly the concept. Now we will see what is a class. A class is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. Let us see an example. I like beautiful rose flower. This is a sentence because this is giving complete meaning. And here the words are arranged grammatically together. So this is a sentence. We can call this a class because this sentence contains a subject and verb. So what is the subject in this sentence? I is the subject. What is the verb? Like is the verb. So both subject and verb both are there in the sentence. So we can call this a class. So a class is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. Okay. Now we will see a relative clause. Look at the picture carefully. We have two sentences to talk about the picture. The first one, he turned the pages. This can be called clause because this sentence has a subject and verb. So, what is the subject in the sentence? He is the subject. Turned is the verb. So, this can be called a clause. Next sentence. The pages were yellow and crinkly. So, this can also be called a clause because this has a subject, the pages, and verb were. So I use two clauses to talk about the picture. Now I will join these two clauses using a relative clause. He turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly. So in this, which were yellow and crinkly is a relative clause. It is giving more information about the noun pages. So a relative clause gives more information about a noun or a pronoun in the main clause. Let us see one more example about relative clause. An old man visited us last night. This is a sentence. This can be called a clause because this sentence have a subject and verb. So what is the subject in the sentence? An old man is the subject. So what is the verb? Visited. So both are there. So we can call this a class. Next sentence. He was my grandfather. He was my grandfather. This is also a sentence because this is giving complete meaning. It has a subject and verb, so we can call this a class. Now I will join these two sentences or these two clauses using a relative clause. The old man who visited us last night was my grandfather. So in this sentence, who visited last night? Who visited us last night is a relative clause. This relative clause is giving more information about the old man. Okay, students, have you understood this point? A relative clause gives more information about a noun or a pronoun in the main clause. This is the first rule of a relative clause. In order to make a relative clause, we need a relative pronoun. Now we will see relative pronouns. The relative pronouns are who, where, when, what, that, which. These are all relative pronouns. We use these relative pronouns in making a relative clause. Examples. I know the man who is standing there. So in this sentence, who is standing there is a relative clause. This relative clause is started with the relative pronoun who. Next one. He read the book which is on the table. Here, which is on the table is a relative clause, and this clause is started with the relative pronoun which. Third one, they like the vase that is over there. So that is over there is a relative clause. It is started with the relative pronoun that. So students, whenever we want to make a relative clause, we need a relative pronoun. So it's very important. So without relative pronoun, we cannot make a relative clause. Okay. Now we will see the important rules of relative clause. 1. A relative clause gives extra information about a person, place, time, or thing. So we have seen in the previous examples. In each and every example, the relative clause gave extra information about a person or about a place or about a thing. Okay. So the first rule is relative clause gives extra information about a person, place, time, or thing. The second one, normally relative clause begins with a relative pronoun. So naturally, relative clause begins with a relative pronoun. In spoken form, we may use or we may not, but in written forms, we have to use the relative pronoun at the time of writing relative clause. Next one. Relative clause functions like an adjective. So in all the previous examples, the relative clause gave the information about a noun. So that means it modifies the noun. If a word modifies a noun, we call that word adjective. So here the total clause is modifying a noun. So that means the relative clause functions like an adjective. So it is known as adjective clause. So the relative clause is also known as an adjective clause. Let us see an example. To understand these four rules, we will see an example. The part Margie hated most was the slot where she had to put homework and test papers. So here, where she had to put homework and test papers is a relative clause. So it is giving extra information about the noun slot. Okay. And this relative clause began with the relative pronoun where. So here the relative clause is modifying the noun slot. So it is functioning like an adjective. So we can also call this relative clause as an adjective clause. Students, have you seen all the rules have been satisfied with our example? Next example we'll see. This is the old kind of school that they had hundreds and hundreds of years. In this sentence also, that they had hundreds and hundreds of years is a relative clause. So it is giving extra information about school, the noun school. It's a place. Okay. So the relative clause started with the relative pronoun that. So here the relative clause is giving extra information. That means he's modifying the noun school. So the relative clause acts as an adjective. So in this sentence, the relative clause is acting as an adjective. So we can call this relative clause as an adjective clause also. So students, relative clause is nothing but an adjective clause because it is modifying a noun in the main clause. If a word or a clause modifies a noun, we call that an adjective clause. Yes, students, have you understood what is a relative clause and what are the functions of the relative clause? I think so you have understood clearly. Thank you, students. Thank you very much.